Welcome to Dr. Lovely's Couch Cafe. It's your host, Dr. Lovely here. And today culminates a big project that I have decided to do. Videos. Yeah. So, welcome. Get ready, because this is going to be a bumpy ride. Topic of the day, the psychology of Drake.
You walk out of here with your head high, with your back straight, knowing that nobody in Cleveland will really fuck with you. That's what this is about. So what I want you to do, I want you to think back to the worst of times. I want you to put that one person in your mind, that one person that thought it was a good idea.
Let's start. So the reason why I decided to do this video is I've watched a lot of videos over the past year, because it's been about a year now since all this shit started. And I realized there are elements to Drake that a lot of people miss. And the reason why they miss these elements is because America is a Christian nation. They have very little understanding of Jewish culture. And because I have studied it very well, and that's just because of my background, was Christian, but I pretty much now follow a Jewish. And I only use that term because that's the way we've come to understand it today. Lifestyle. So I have a different perspective of this situation. And I've heard a lot of people talk about him not going through anything. So my background is in psychology, and I have a different way of attacking this situation. Most people say he didn't go through anything. Well, he did. He was a black boy who grew up in an all-Jewish neighborhood, and his whole life was encompassed from that perspective. Now, there are two things that we have to look at when it comes to how he grew up. One, he's biracial. So psychologically, if we look at statistics, a lot of biracial children struggle with identity, right? And especially those who have black and white parents, they have a hard time. The statistics of children with biracial, who are biracial, actually have a strong suicidal ideation, which means they think about, killing themselves. And also depression is very common, right? So when we're looking at the things that we're seeing with him, you have to realize that he struggled with his identity his whole life. And that's just because he's biracial. It's common, right? So you also have to understand he struggled with acceptance. Not only acceptance of himself, self-acceptance, but he also struggled for acceptance in his community. Again, he's Jewish. That type of he was ostracized, right? And is very common, right? In their culture. We can look at Israel right now, right? The Falashas, these are the Jews who were from Ethiopia, right? And they're very well mistreated there in Jerusalem, right? In Israel. They are really mistreated. They do very heinous and fucked up shit to them. So when you really think about what we're dealing with him, and people are not understanding him, is because we're devoid of Jewish culture. Therefore, we really don't understand what his struggle or his internal struggle is. And this is the reason why I decided to do this video. I want to bring you into the world of Drake and help you understand who he is and some of the things he was taught growing up. And the most important piece is the fact that there's something that you learn about the culture is people assume that all Jews just keep the Torah, which is like the first 5 books of Moses. It's not just about the first 5 books. They keep the whole Old Testament. All of that is kind of intertwined in some way. So you miss a lot of nuances not knowing the culture. That's one. Number two, this is the thing. We already know that the Jews had a plan for him, right? So this is his time to feel accepted by them, right? So him in this industry working alongside with his people, right, gave him a sense of belonging. And if you really want to understand what that's like, I mean, for him, of course, it's just similar to the atrocities and the shit we experience here in the American culture. So I think getting your mind wrapped around that will help you really understand, you know, how hard it is for him, or how hard it was for him to really fit in, right? And be accepted. So he was finally accepted, by them when he broke into the industry. But the problem was him suing them. And that's a no-no, but we'll get into that later. We're going to get a little snippet of some of their belief system. And this is called the Talmud. I'll give you an explanation when this is done.
The Talmud provides generous loopholes for adultery. It says the penalty for adultery does not include sex with a minor, the wife of a minor, or the wife of a heathen. The Talmud also encourages seduction of unwed adolescent girls called designated bondmaids. But it's important how such rapes are performed. With the designated bondmaid, one is guilty only in the case of natural connection, but not in the case of perverse connection. The Pharisees reasoned that rape in a perverted manner is outside the jurisdiction of the law. Normal rape, however, was punishable. In Babylon, sexual perversion of every kind had been a way of life for millenniums. The Pharisees were deeply influenced by such practices.
In 3 of the major treatises of the Talmud are found extensive passages which give legal endorsement to seduce and marry 3-year-old baby girls. In fact, many of the greatest rabbis of the Talmud, including Simeon ben Yochai, upheld this privilege. Today in Israel, thousands of Jews go to Meron every year to venerate the memory of Simeon ben Yochai, one of the most respected rabbis in the history of Judaism.
In one of dozens of endorsements of child sex, Simeon ben Yochai said, "A proselyte under the age of 3 years and a day is permitted to marry a priest." Agreeing with ben Yochai, the great rabbah said, "When a grown-up man has intercourse with a little girl, it is nothing, or when the girl is less than this, 3 years and a day, it is as if one put the finger into the eye." The footnote to this passage says, "As tears come to the eye again and again, so does virginity come back to the little girl under 3 years."
We can truly see where Drake gets some of these principles from, right? And the thing I need you to understand is the Talmud is upheld more than the Torah itself. The Torah is the books that God gave to Moses. So considering all of the stuff we've been seeing, you can definitely understand why he's been doing some of this stuff.
Y'all gonna have me get carried away again. I get trolls and shit like this. How old are you? Oh, that's I can't go to jail yet, man. 17? Why do you look like that? You big. Look at all this. Well, all right. Well, listen, sir.
All right. I'm gonna be honest with you. Do I think Drake is a pedophile? Clearly not. No. I do believe 2 things could be true, though. By the way, I don't think this looks good at all.
Y'all gonna have me get carried away again. I get trolls.
Yes, it's disturbing. But I think today people don't really care anymore, right? When we face with all of the stuff around about us. But you have to definitely take into consideration his Jewish upbringing. And there's a difference between the Hebrew people and the things in which they walked and did versus the Judaism, because Judaism really focused, the Talmud trumps the Torah. The Torah is, as I stated before, that's the book that God gave to Moses. And then you take into consideration what Andrew Schultz said. Nobody talked about him being Jewish and the stuff he actually said, about Kendrick. And it's no different than what Drake put in his diss track. Let's not forget. He said, Kendrick just opened his mouth. I'm about to put my, right now. What's the difference between the thing that he and Andrew Schultz said? The same shit. They can say whatever they want, right? But you can't say anything about them. But when we talk about the principles in which he grew up in, the Talmud shaped it. It's a big component to who he is. And this, because we live in a Christian nation, we miss it. To be honest, Kendrick was spanking his ass from a Hebrew perspective. Huh. How about that shit? Yeah, that's what he did. But let's move on.
The Jewish Encyclopedia begins to define what makes a Jew so different from a Gentile. According to the rabbis, only Israelites are men. Gentiles they classed not as men, but as barbarians. Since Gentiles are not men in the fullest sense, so the Gentile is not a neighbor of a Jew. Further, since Gentile laws were too crude to admit of reciprocity, meaning too crude to be taken seriously, the Gentile was forever beneath the Jew. Gentiles were outlawed by God from the beginning, and thus had no property rights. The Almighty offered the Torah to the Gentile nations also, but since they refused to accept it, he withdrew his shining legal protection from them and transferred their property rights to Israel, who observed his law. Since the Talmud outlawed the child, or issue of a Gentile, as that of a beast, a Gentile had as little legal rights in a Jewish court as did an animal. The Talmud states that if a Gentile sue an Israelite, the verdict is for the defendant, the Israelite. Conversely, if the Israelite is the plaintiff, he obtains full damages. Because the Talmud conspires against Gentiles, if a Jew was ever caught telling a Gentile what the Talmud really says, such a person deserves death. So vile was the nature of a Gentile that the great Simeon ben Yohai said, "The best among the Gentiles deserves to be killed. The best of snakes ought to have its head crushed."
So when we take into consideration the things that's stated in Not Like Us, right? You run to Atlanta and you run over here and you run over there. It already tell you that there's a system set up mentally, physically and culturally, that it's okay to take from people who are not Jewish, right? And that's what's written in the Talmud. And I need you to understand there's a difference between the two. It is a big difference, right? Of Judaism and the Hebrew people in the book. Because in Judaism, Talmud reigns supreme. It's more venerated. So what's in the book is what they perform or act out and adhere to. So you
when
have
you're
to
looking at him,
who he is.
right? You have no choice to begin to see, right, how it shaped his mind and his principles and the things in which he followed, right? So this is a big component to the things that you've seen, right? Openly, him sleeping with other people's, women and all of these other things. So like if you're sleeping with a Gentile's wife, it's okay. It's not bad, right? You can do that because he's a Jew and they're Gentiles. And you can treat them however you want, right? And there will be no penalty or consequence from God from what he does, right? So when you think about how he grew up, right, and we're getting to the psychology of him, the formulations of a narcissist and a psychopath is pretty much where you're getting here, right? The abuse from his peers that he experienced as a child, and the struggle with his own personal identity because he's biracial. And again, I don't want you to think I'm being racist. I'm not. Because oftentimes this is what we get when we talk about these things. But this is something that we need to start talking about in our culture. Like, we really don't have these conversations about these things because we're not taught the psychology of a lot of things that we see and experience within our culture. This is a prime example of that, of what happens when a child is biracial. We don't have this dynamic. We don't talk about it, but it's a big problem. And I've seen many videos of biracial women talking about how their white mothers talk about black people. And they're forgetting that their child is part black. It's an interesting nuance to see it. And I think this is the thing why I love, I really went to study psychology, because we see a lot of different things, but we never talk about them within our community. But if we're really trying to get an understanding of what's happening with him openly, why he has a problem with being beat, understand, in his mind, a Jew is never beat by a Gentile. And even if you look at Kendrick and saying that he's now keeping Hebrew culture, to Drake, he's still not a Jew, right? Because he wasn't raised, or his mother isn't Jewish. Therefore, he's still considered a Gentile and a convert. And in his mind, he's still a Gentile. And he has no, what? No authority to beat him. Who is he? This is why you miss it. This is why people really miss what you're seeing with him. Is because you miss the cultural confines and how he was raised to what he was raised to believe. And when you begin to get to the psychology of who he is, you begin to understand who he is. At some points, I feel sorry for him because of this, because of how he grew up and what he was taught to think. It was skewed. It's a skewed sense of thinking when you feel as if you're superior, because this is not what's taught in the Torah. The Torah tells you to respect all people. But what you're taught in the Talmud is something fucking completely different, goddammit. And this is why everybody's scrambling to figure him out. Y'all ass miss how the fuck he was raised and what he was raised to think. Now, the problem now, goddamn, is this. He was finally accepted, so he thought he was one of them. Yeah, that's what the fuck he thought. Yeah, he done fucked up. I'm gonna tell you one thing about Jewish people, niggas. And that's this. They stick together. They don't openly sue each other. You will never fucking find that shit. They handle their business privately. That's how they handle it. But let's get to our next segment.
That, like, Asher's Jewish. Right. He's not. His dad's Jewish. He doesn't really identify. All loves to Jews, but he's not Jewish.
Yeah.
You, on the other hand...
But he wasn't there. He didn't read his portion, first of all.
You didn't have a bar mitzvah.
Come on. Are you serious?
You had a... Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. Just tell... You don't understand how big you're about to be in the Jew world right now.
You don't understand how big
Yo,
First of all, I live in an all-Jewish area, so...
Where is that?
Forest Hill.
Okay.
I went to a predominantly Jewish school growing up. I definitely had a bar mitzvah in an Italian restaurant, mind you.
My lord.
Yeah.
A nice Italian restaurant?
A very nice Italian restaurant. The song of the night was Backstreet Boys' I Want It That Way.
You are younger than me.
Yeah.
I forget about that.
Yeah. And yeah, man, I was in there. I was in synagogue. I had my yarmulke on.
Hebrew school, the whole nine? You did no Hebrew school?
I cheated. I didn't really.
So you just did that? No. Your parents are nice.
Yeah.
So they let you do the bar mitzvah without. So your mom's Jewish.
My mother's Jewish, and you know we have great Jewish dinners like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
First text message you ever sent me. Good Shabbos.
Yep, good Shabbos.
He kept it real.
Yep. I kept it all.
Have you gotten approached yet by like the Jewish media yet?
No, I haven't gotten approached by the Jewish media, but somebody today, who I won't mention, was like, you know how big you're gonna be? And I was like,
Wait, was that me 5 minutes ago? I remember saying that.
somebody's like, you know how big you're gonna be? And he's like, this has never happened before. It's like every Jew is going to just like really embrace.
Well,
this
here's the
project.
thing. There are Jews like my dad who like cling to like the biggest reaches.
Yeah.
Like, you know who's Jewish? Matt Damon. I'm like, no, he's not, Dad. He's definitely not Jewish. And like people reach, and the fact that you actually identify, that's gonna be like, that's gonna be big.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy.
You're doing something that I could never do. You're being black and Jewish, man.
I know.
It's never gonna. No, I've tried. Ask every Chevy Chase Elementary School and Westland Middle School. I tried my hardest, but at the end of the day, I'm here wearing shorts in cold weather and long sleeves. You know what I'm saying?
It's all good.
So in all seriousness, though, like, is this a little crazy?
Yeah, no, it's beyond a little crazy, you know. But the key is to keep my composure and just know that at the end of the day, these are all human beings and they are all here for a positive reason, which is to see a good show. And it's on me to give it to them. If I don't, then I'm the worst artist of all time.
So understanding that his Jewish heritage is always going to be in the forefront, right? And considering what happened with Kendrick, right, when we look at it truthfully, you can understand why he's having a hard time with what transpired, right? Because if we just go back to what we learned about what's stated in the Talmud about what's called Goy or a Gentile or the other nations, anyone that's not Jewish, right? They're not considered, like there's a point in there where it talks about people being human chattel, like the same thing that black people had placed upon themselves, human chattel, right? And it can help you understand why he would make a statement like, I'm going to beat you like a slave or put on blackface, right? Because they've deduced anyone that's not Jewish as human chattel, right? So getting to the psychology of it all, when you start taking into consideration all these nuances and how this comes together, it helps you really to understand the person in which we see, who he is, what he grew up understanding, that anyone that's not Jewish is considered less than a human, right? Because that's human chattel. That's pretty much what they deduced, people of color to be. Actually, to be honest, it's these points here in the Talmud that actually is the real reason why we saw some of the principles of what we dealt with in this country, our ancestors dealt with in this country. It has so much to do with the Talmud, right? Like, because majority of the slave ships were Jewish merchants, right? So like when you get the dynamics, you begin to understand the mindset, and that brings us right into where we're coming next, which is his music career, right? They had a plan for him. When Drake entered into the rap community, he felt a constant need to prove himself. This need for validation often led to feelings of inadequacy as he tried to fit into a culture that was vastly different from his upbringing. He needed to prove himself. And I guess I'm reminded of when my kids were young, and because they spoke well or, talked different, even though we grew up in the hood, right? They did. And a lot of times they found it very difficult to kind of connect with other black kids because the way I was raising them wasn't the way I was raised, right? Because they were still living in the hood. We lived in Inglewood. But the kind of life I provided for them was a lot different from the life I experienced when I was growing up in LA, especially during the time I grew up, because it was the height of gang culture. So when you have this, you're immersing yourself into a place that you're not quite comfortable he's already with, having issue with. It's a foreign territory because he grew up Jewish. And trying to connect what this is where that inauthenticity comes from too, that you pick up from him, right? People are like, oh, he's fake. Well, if you're trying to blend into a place, right, that you have no emotional connection to, you're going to stand off. Now, over time, being immersed in the culture and, being around the people, you'll pick it up. And this is also where that inauthenticity comes from, too, is because it's not, connected. Remember, the early Drake didn't say nigga. He said nigger because he's used to hearing his people say that to him. Think about it. You grow up with someone calling you a nigger, not a nigga. And to get to the nuances of the word itself, there are multiple variations of this word, which is why we, black people in America, have a misconception about the word. The truth about the word nigga is there are multiple variations. Niggas, Negus, which is royal in Hebrew. Negav, Negef, which is in Hebrew. Again, this nigga goddamn. You can't film shit with his ass in the goddamn house, goddamn it. Sorry, y'all, that's my son. Yeah, goddamn, nigga. Where was I at? Negef, which is cursed, right? So there's so many variation of this word in Hebrew. And see, that's where they fuck y'all up at, is that you haven't come to a realization, and that's a story for another day. But nonetheless, he couldn't say it because he grew up with somebody calling him a nigga. So of course, his assumption is that that's what we call each other. Nigger. So again, we're getting back to the blending and understanding the culture and how he grew up and the mentality and the things that he grew up seeing and experiencing, right? But let's get to the definition of these terms that I quoted earlier, the narcissist and the psychopath, because y'all also have another misconception of the term psychopath. Yes, there are many serial killers who are psychopaths, but the majority of the people who actually are psychopaths are everyday people. It's not a serial killer. Your police officers, firefighters, doctors, lawyers, CEOs, the like. The people who have high power jobs or jobs where they decide, whether motherfuckers should live or die. Right? But that's where we're going next. And y'all forgive me because this is my first time doing this type of video. I often do podcasts where I can freeform and say the fuck I want. This right here is kind of hard because I got ADHD, goddammit. And it's structured. And I'm not really good with structured shit, but I'll learn. I'll get to it eventually. Behavior and psychological implications of Drake. Recently, Drake has been seen in streaming videos apparently intoxicated and seemingly spiraling out of control. These videos have raised concerns among fans and critics alike, as they suggest deeper psychological issues at play. In these videos, Drake appears to be under the influence, exhibiting erratic behavior and a lack of control. This public display of intoxication has led to speculation about his mental state and the pressures he's facing in the spotlight. Drake's recent behavior might indicate narcissistic personality traits. Narcissistic personality disorder, also known as NPD, is characterized by a grandiose sense of self, importance, right? A need for excessive admiration and a lack of empathy for others. Individuals with NPD often have an inflated sense of self or an inflated sense of their own importance and a need for attention and admiration. They may also exhibit arrogant behaviors and attitude, believing they are superior to others. They also have a manipulative aspect to them that is so good. This is where y'all get gaslighting misconstrued. The term gaslighting is really when someone is so good at fucking manipulating you to the point that you always feel like you've done something wrong. And you're constantly questioning yourself to figure out where you went wrong or how you went wrong. That's fucking gaslighting. The shit y'all talking about is just fucking manipulation. Gaslighting is a way, it's done in such a dangerous way. You're constantly like, did I do something wrong? And you're constantly second guessing yourself. That's gaslighting. We just use terms all willy-nilly, nigga. You can't just be out here quoting terms just because you heard somebody say it. You really need to understand what it means before you say it. But that's another story for another day. Getting to it again. Drake's need for validation and admiration, coupled with his grandiose public persona, aligns with these traits. His erratic behavior and apparent disregard for the consequences of his actions may also reflect a lack of empathy and an inflated sense of self-worth. And this is something we often see. This is also the reason why it's difficult for him to realize that he's lost, right? How the fuck did that happen to me? I'm like the motherfucking king of the universe. What the fuck you talking about? I ain't lost shit. Like, no, I haven't. You really got to think about it. Illustrative images of psychopathic tendencies, right? Psychopathic tendencies, in addition to narcissistic trait, Drake's behavior may also exhibit psychopathic tendencies. Psychopathy is characterized by impulsivity. Impulsivity is when someone is constantly doing something without thinking about the consequences of it. They just do it willy-nilly. There's no thought of what's going to happen with the things that you're actually doing. There's no thought of consequences, like him suing UMG. Way later on and thinking he's going to get away with it. And not really thinking about the fact that he also was receiving the same privileges that he's fighting against, right? You have to understand the psychopathology of that, right? Is the fact that he doesn't connect those impulsive behaviors and what the consequences of those things are going to do. It's like him dropping those albums. That's impulsivity without realizing that they have to be cleared by the record label. This is why y'all ass is frustrated, because you're not understanding that there's ways that business have to be done, but because he was one of the boys, he didn't have to do the same thing that the rest of the people did. He had freedom, right? Now you biting the hand that feeds you. Ooh, got a problem there, don't you? Yeah, that part. Okay. Manipulative behavior and a lack of remorse. Psychopaths often engage in risky or reckless behavior without considering the consequences, and they may manipulate others for personal gain. Drake's impulsive actions, such as appearing intoxicated in public, and his manipulative interactions with others, suggest a potential for psychopathic tendencies. These behaviors, combined with a lack of remorse for his actions, point to a complex picture of his psychological state. In summary, Drake's recent behavior highlights the complexities of his psychological makeup and the combination of narcissistic and psychopathic traits influenced by his early life experiences and the pressures of fame contribute to the public persona we see today. Understanding these dynamics can provide insight into the actions and challenges he faced, coping mechanisms, and resiliency. Despite the challenges and controversies he faced, Drake has shown remarkable resilience. One of his primary coping mechanisms is his music, which serves as both an outlet and a form of therapy. And I guess you can kind of see that with the last thing he dropped, right? It's really him tapping into the emotions and how he actually feels about the people he assumed were close to him. And I think the thing that he misses, right, oftenly is in the industry, people have their own friends. But then there's like work business. It's kind of the best way to explain this, kind of like how you're in like sports. And there are certain things in your contract that they expect you to do, which is engage with other people, organizations, your public persona, or the person you're supposed to be openly in public. That's why they go through these trainings in order to teach them how to engage in public situations. So like right now, you're talking about bad for stock. Seriously, he looks unstable mentally. He's drinking, he's gambling, he's doing all these reckless things. And that doesn't look good for stock. Like, you talk about what your personal or public persona is supposed to be in order to gain all the money and the deals that you get. The big component to that is how you appeal to the public. And if you're sellable, right? If we're looking at it, it's kind of like how back in the day, when they were putting us on the block and they would put their fingers all in their mouth by showing the teeth and like, hey, look, he's good for public. He's a perfect specimen. And it's the same situation. I think these are things we have to really consider into taking when we're really looking at who he is and what we're actually seeing. You know what I'm saying? I want to go back a little bit because I kind of like missed something. So the relationship and controversies is where I missed. When Drake entered the rap community, he felt a constant need to prove himself. This need for validation often led to feelings of inadequacy as he tried to fit into a culture that was vastly different from his upbringing. And I want to bring a video in.
And I just realized a long time ago, I'm not gonna make everybody love me, and people are going to also kind of, I'm like a character. I'm not like a real. I don't feel often when I meet people, I have to like humanize myself.
If we look at that statement, humanize myself from a narcissist and psychopathic, in essence, I have to humble.
We both getting rich, but the trust getting broke. Tell me down with words, but I know that's how you cope. Cover up a lot, can't cover up your soul. Oh, you're not happy, girl, everybody know.
Hey, they were saying that you pressed me earlier, like that, like you're like, why do you want to know where they're from? So like, what's up, bro? Huh? They were saying like you trying to press me, like, why? Yeah.
She wanna sweet tonight. That booty look good tonight. I'm running with that seed tonight.
Well, that segment took me right back to I don't like Drake when he act tough. That shit don't even look authentic. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what that looks like. Someone's pretending to be something that they're not. Right? And it takes you back to that inflated ego, the grandiose person. Right? So as we continue on, looking at these elements, you can really see it in his actions and his doings. And it makes so much sense, right? I really want, let me just give you my opinion of this. I think really people misconceptualize the culture that he grew up in, right? And I just want to hammer that in again. You're dealing with the Jewish culture and the way they interact within culture. And I'll take it back again. We talk about him suing UMG. How does a Jew sue another Jew? You already got beside yourself.
There are other Jews that don't like other ones. It
Yes.
depends on which one you are.
I mean, we're talking about design. These are Zionist Jews that run the industry. That's
They
a whole nother level.
Stick together, kind of.
Well, Jewish people stick together completely. Sorry, this is my daughter. Jewish people stick together completely. Period. That's part of the culture. You don't fucking sue another Jew.
That's true.
Right? You don't put our business in the street. That's a whole nother thing. Right? Because this is exactly what he did. He put their business in the street.
That's true.
Right? And one, you also got to look at he's a nigga. Now you publicly humiliating us. How dare you? Listen, they finna spank his ass. Because again, he assumed that he was accepted and he's one of them. He will never be one of them, ever. Taking you back to the Falashas again. Do you know what they do to the Falashas over in Jerusalem? They sterilize them. We don't need y'all reproducing. How could you have ever thought, let me speak to the man. How could you have ever thought they would accept you? They will never accept you. And the problem is, you fucked up your black card. We accept everybody. Goddamn. But when you was out here doing that fuck shit, sleeping with other dudes' girls and doing all that other shit, that's the thing. He has no allegiance to anybody black. How can you not see that? Pulling him to the carpet, seriously, by actions. I don't think I've seen him. Did he even go to Kaisamet? No. Drake didn't even go to him. Do you notice that? Like, it's the best way to see it. Like when we really think about what we're seeing here openly. And it's funny because even a lot of the guys that I had a whole argument with a kid. I'm 51. That's why I said it. And the rationale that we're dealing with the guys that see him is a younger generation. Their perception of him is really about the money and the fame aspect because that's what this generation focus on. That's why it's impossible to get them to understand. You're still dealing with a generation of a bunch of narcissistic people. What do you think social media breeds? Is increasing the amount of narcissism in our people's culture that we've never seen before. So you're arguing with a bunch of narcissists. You could never and I do mean never, get a narcissist to see reason. So while y'all ass over there arguing with them fools, it doesn't make any sense to argue with them because our narcissists never see fucking reason. Period. Is a reason why academics can never understand that Drake will never accept him. And we're still getting back to culture because, again, what is they taught in the Talmud? That we can take from them and use them the way we want to use them. Duh, this is what academics dumbass don't get. You're fighting against culture. This is something he was born and raised to think. Periodly. And the best way to explain that is this. If you grow up with thieves stealing and doing shit, they believe that's correct. No matter how much you get them or try to get them to change the way they perceive a thing. And we're still dealing with perception here. A person's perception is their reality. What do I mean by that? How you perceive a thing, the way you look at it, right, is your reality. This is why you don't argue with fools. Because it's a waste of time to get someone to see something in a particular way. Foolish people have an inability to actually see reason. This is why you don't argue with them. If they can't reason out, then you just making your fucking self frustrated. So eventually, seriously, I appeal to you to help you understand what we're seeing with him is something that he was bred to think. And when you're bred to think that you are the top and you could never fall, that's all you're gonna fucking see. And you're bred to think that you can take from anybody you want, you're gonna fucking do that. And that's exactly what we're dealing with when we look at him and the things that we're seeing. And it's also the reason why you're having these dialogues with people trying to get them to see shit that they can't see. No matter what. So I'm getting off my horse now because, people with ADHD will go down the whole goddamn rabbit hole with your ass. And that shit gonna change in multiple directions. But I hope you had a good time. And this is my first video. And I had a lot of fun. And I'll try this again another day. Maybe I'll do the psychology of Kendrick. And maybe this just be a new thing. And we'll just get to the psychology of a whole lot of motherfuckers out here, goddamn. I don't know where and what direction I want to go with this. My podcast is Dr. Lovely's Couch Cafe. And we're on pretty much all streaming platforms. This is Dr. Lovely signing off. Shalom, family.